G'day lads and ladies, and welcome to the What's Up Mate podcast, where everything is live, including the conversation. Hey everybody, you're with your host Jake Sparrow. This podcast is intended for licensed electricians or apprentices with adequate supervision. Today I'm going to dive into fault finding, two very common faults you may receive on a residential call out. This one is tailored more for your third or fourth year apprentice, or perhaps even a fresh tradesperson who doesn't have a lot of experience in the fault finding scene. On the way to the job, you may have some preconceived ideas in your head of what the issue may be, and that's brilliant. You're already thinking of what the issue may be. But when you get to site, surprise, surprise, the client or the tenant has thrown you a curveball by adding in their 2 cents on what the problem could be, which may be completely different to what you've already got in your head. Now, remember, they have called you because they are not the professional, you are. However, they may have some valuable clues as to what the issue could be. In this example, we are going to discuss a partial loss of power. Your job notes say that they have lost some power to part of the home, and they have been doing nothing unusual. All circuit breakers are in the on position. Instantly, there are a few things that come to my mind: a failed circuit breaker, a broken conductor, or perhaps in a multi-phase installation, maybe the street has lost a phase. In each instance, the first place to start is in the switchboard. Always start here, unless there are obvious cause to look elsewhere, such as a burnt outlet, etc. You're in the switchboard and you have access to the line and load side of all the circuit breakers, along with a neutral and an earth. With the appropriate PPE and a suitably rated multimeter, you're ready to find this fault. First port of call is check that you have all incoming phases, testing the line side of the main switch and also the load side. Once you have confirmed voltage on each phase, both line and load, you can move on. If you don't have voltage on the line side of the main switch, it's a supply authority issue. If you have voltage on the line side but not on the load side, you have a burnt out main switch and it's time. Right, so your main switch is all sweet, voltage on each phase. Now it's time to move on to testing the line and load side of all your safety switches and circuit breakers, or your RCBOs. Some people call them combos. If you're in a board with safety switches and circuit breakers or fuses, it's good to note that some of the older homes, especially with semi-enclosed rewirable fuses still in use, and a 4-pole safety switch, sometimes fed the fuses first, then through the safety switch, so the safety switch will protect the circuits after the fuse. But in a slightly more modern board, your safety switch will feed the circuit breakers either way. The testing will be similar, but just in reverse. So you're going to want to check that you have voltage line to neutral on your safety switch on both line and load sides. If you don't, that's where the issue lies. If you do, let's move on to the circuit breakers, making sure you have voltage at the line and load side of the breaker. Boom, you're lucky. It's a Friday arvo and you found a failed circuit breaker. You can swap that over and you're good to go home, right? Well, nearly. You still need to verify that the circuit is still safe to re-energise. Perhaps there was an overload issue or a short circuit that caused the breaker to internally trip, but it didn't trip the toggle, and now it won't reset. With the whole of the installation isolated, main switch or meter isolator off, you can now remove the neutral for the final sub-circuit you're working on from the neutral bar. It's important to have the installation off because in the instance of a common RCD, you may actually have a mixed neutral. And if you have the circuit energized that is sharing the neutral you are about to test on, you will actually end up with 230 volts on the end of the neutral when you disconnect it. And that is enough to ruin your early knockoff. Cool, so active is out of the breaker, neutral is out of the neutral bar. Let's grab your insulation tester, or mega as some like to call it, and ensure that you've got your tester set to 250 volts so you don't damage any connected equipment. And it's time to get testing. Remembering, we are looking for results of greater than 1 megohm ideally. The higher the reading, the better. If it is below 20 megohms, I would have a chat with the client about the possibility of there being water ingress or damaged cables and potentially looking further. Although AS3000 states that all insulation testing shall be carried out at 500 volts, however, in a domestic scenario where the home is being lived in, the risk of damaging appliances is high, so we stick with the 250 volt test unless we can 100% confirm that nothing is connected. First test is your line to neutral test. If you have appliances connected, it will always show a low insulation resistance reading, so take it with a grain of salt when testing this. or make sure you have everything unplugged, which might be easy if it's a dedicated circuit to, say, a car charger or a spa, but if it is a general power circuit, it could take you quite some time to locate all of the appliances plugged into the affected circuit. Let's say you have actually confirmed that all the appliances have been disconnected and you're getting a line to neutral reading of 25 megohms. That's a pass because it's greater than 1 megohm. Now we're moving on to testing your line to earth. It's as easy as getting your insulation tester connected to earth and active and pressing the test button. Boom, we get a result similar to that of the line to neutral test previous, and it's all clear. We're on to the next step. Last test is your neutral to earth test. Leave your earth connected to your tester and move your lead from the active to the neutral. Hit test, check the results. Boom, you've got a figure similar to that of your initial insulation test. Happy days. You're good to re-energise that circuit knowing that there was no fault present on the cabling. Appliances could be a different scenario, but they are unplugged and ultimately not your responsibility. A note about your insulation test is that the results active to neutral, active to earth, and neutral to earth should be all around the same result. Otherwise, it could be an indication of degrading insulation or moisture ingress. Once you have replaced the circuit breaker, just throw your eyes over the switchboard, check to see if the MEN link is intact and actually in the correct location. The terminal screws throughout the board are all tight, and you have done the tug test on the conductors to make sure they are actually under the terminal and not tucked in behind it. Last few tests to do once you've energised is a polarity check on the affected circuit you have just re-energised. The easiest way to identify this circuit is turn each other final sub-circuit off and go through the home with a polarity checker checking tool such as the Fluke ST240 Plus, which is what we use, and we have them for all of our guys working with us, and check each outlet that is live has the correct polarity. This tester will actually identify more than just polarity. It will identify an earth fault, which basically means your earth is not connected, a neutral fault, your neutral is not connected. It's actually got an audible buzzer too, so when you've got it connected into a live power point, it will actually make a high-pitched squawk. Now you can mute that because it does get super annoying all the time. Once you're happy, all the outlets on that circuit have the correct polarity, grab your installation multifunction tester out. There are so many of these on the market now. However, we run the Fluke 1664 FC meters. The FC basically means it's your Fluke Connect. It can connect wirelessly to your phone via Bluetooth. Now, we want to identify what outlet is the furthest is the furthest point in the circuit. Check our voltage, line to neutral, line to earth, and neutral to earth. Run our fault loop test, which is line to earth, line to neutral impedance, and a quick RCD test. Now you're happy, you've completed over and above what most electricians in the field would do. You've restored power, and you're able to sleep at night knowing you have checked the basics at this home. You got lucky though. A faulty circuit breaker is an easy fix. Easily identified, and you haven't had to get in the roof or touch any wiring. Dream job, right? Let's say you've gone through, checked the switchboard, and all of your breakers and safety switches are testing up sweet. All your terminations are good. Now what? You're gonna have to grab a multimeter or your polarity checker. Never grab your volt stick for fault finding, and run through the home, checking which socket outlets are affected. Great time to ask the client or tenant which ones they have found aren't working and put a bit of tape on the outlets that are affected. Now, with your multimeter or polarity checker, you'll be able to identify exactly what you're looking for, a broken neutral or a broken active. Now, a broken neutral will show as active to neutral 0 volts, but active to earth 230 volt, and neutral to earth 230 volt, assuming appliances are still plugged in. A broken active, on the other hand, will show 0 volts all round. Pretty obvious, that one. Once you've identified this, turn all other sub-circuits off and leave the one you are fault finding live. And with your experience of installing sub-circuits, have a bit of a think of how it is likely the circuit has been installed. Then start identifying which outlets are live and which outlets are not. It's likely in the last power point working or the first power point not working, or the last place is the cabling in between. Sorry, you might have to get in the roof or under the floor to look for damage here. Now's the time to isolate power and start pulling plates off walls and visually inspecting the circuit. What do you know? You found a burnt neutral connection in an outlet. You're good to re-terminate and run through your test previously mentioned before, and you're on your way, once you've cleaned up, of course. In this example, we're going to have a quick look at a tripping RCD. I remember vividly as an apprentice getting to a fault and my brain going a million miles an hour, running around tearing my hair out with no real course of action. It would always be a different method I would use to identify a fault. I have no idea what I was thinking. Maybe that if I changed my plan of attack, I could maybe sneak up on the fault. Who knows? It wasn't until I really started to slow down and think about a sequence of testing that made sense to me and was methodical, and I could use it across all of the common faults we see, that I really started to get quick and efficient at fault finding. So you've climbed out of the van and straight to the switchboard. Step 1, always. You've identified which RCD is tripped and you get to work. You'd be surprised by how often we come across failed RCDs that just don't want to reset. Let's identify which sub-circuits the RCD is protecting. On this example, we find 2 power and 1 light circuit protected by this RCD. Now let's turn those off and try to reset the RCD. If the RCD holds, bummer. Now it's likely we're chasing a fault here. If the RCD won't reset even with all of the sub-circuits off, it's likely to be a failed RCD. However, we still want to check insulation resistance of our sub-circuit it is protecting in case something has caused it to trip in the first case, then causing it to fail. So you've already got your insulation tester by your side because, well, you know a thing or two about how these faults go and you already know you're probably going to need it. So it's time to test your sub-circuits. We keep the circuit breakers off and identify the neutrals for the circuits we would like to test and disconnect them from the protected neutral bar. We're going to go through each sub-circuit's insulation resistance, line to earth and neutral to earth. First up, we're going to test power circuit 1. These tests all greater than 200 megohms. Perfect. Power circuit 2 tests and fails line to earth, neutral to earth, all below 0.01 megohms. Do you stop here? Best not. I'd always test the last circuit just to be sure you're only looking for one fault. So light circuit 1 tests all greater than 200 megohms. Perfect. You're only chasing one fault on power circuit 2. Now, let's make our life a bit easy. We're going to actually reconnect the circuits you have tested and passed and re-energize them. Now you're going to go around the home with your polarity checker and identify what outlets are on power 2 circuit. It's easy because you've got this neutral out of the neutral link and you have the circuit breaker off. So it's the circuit that is off that we're looking for here. So any outlets that has no power to it. We want to also unplug all the appliances that are connected to this circuit while we're in the house doing this and go back to the board to retest your circuit. If the results have changed and there's now a passing result, you have a faulty appliance. Likely culprits in my experience are gas cooktops that have had a pot boil over, rice cookers, kettles, a toaster. Obviously any appliance can become faulty, but these are the more common that we come across. If you're still getting a fail result, which is less than 1 megohms, it's time to put your thinking cap on. Have you had extreme wet weather recently? Has water made it into the wiring system or maybe the accessories? A quick visual inspection is a good idea around the perimeter of the building. You might even be able to spot a waterlogged power point. If you can't see anything obvious, it's time to start splitting the circuit and checking for insulation resistance. Fastest way to do this is find what you think would be the middle of the circuit, check for dead, then split the cabling so that all the neutrals and actives are apart and your earths are still within the outlet. Then head back to the board. Retest. If the fault has cleared, you know the first half of the circuit is okay up until the point you have split it. If the fault is still present, the front half of the circuit has failed. So now you've sort of isolated where the fault could be, basically halving your looking time. So back to the point of your split and test the tails you have there. Line to earth and neutral to earth. The tails that test with a pass value, I personally bend and face the conductors to the sky. The tails that fail the test, I point to the ground because, well, they are actually, down to earth. This is a super easy way to ensure you are testing only cables that have now failed tests and you're not wasting your time retesting cables that are passing. We now repeat this step up until we can pinpoint exactly what has caused the issue. If you find yourself getting flustered, I suggest taking a 5-minute break at the van, grab a drink of water and have a few deep breaths. The amount of times I have walked away from a fault, had a coffee or a water and a deep breath and gone back in and had the fault basically land on my lap is astounding. Common things that we come across that cause RCDs to trip, which is a low insulation resistance fault, basically are storm events, so water ingress, vermin damaging cable, now whether that's mice, birds in country areas, ants find their way into outlets and generally bridge out neutral and earth or active and earth. I'm not sure why, but they are actually attracted to the power points. I think it's probably got something to do with the warmth that can be associated there. We're also culprits are mechanical damage to cabling, so screws through cables, etc. Cable rub-throughs, especially on fixed appliances with vibrations such as air conditioners or hot water heat pumps. Next time you're called out to a fault and you're a bit nervous about it or how long it will take you to locate and repair it, just remember, if you're in a van by yourself as an apprentice, your boss has deemed you competent, so they have faith that you are up to the job. And you should have mobile contact with them or a tradesman if you encounter anything out of the ordinary. If you're a tradesman with little experience in the fault finding game, think back to what they taught you at trade school, call upon your previous experience and have a crack. Remember, if you're calling to ask for help, the person you are calling for the help is going to want to know that you have at least checked the switchboard, voltages in and out of the circuit protection devices, and insulation resistance of circuits, and what you have done to at least try to find the fault. Don't call them without having some information handy, or you'll likely be hung up on, or some choice words may be sent your way through the phone. This was a super quick rundown on 2 simple domestic faults you're likely to experience weekly in the field as an electrician. I hope you've picked up 1 or 2 tricks with this podcast. Happy sparking. Thanks for listening. You've just listened to another What's Up Mate podcast produced by an Aussie Tech for Aussie Techs.